Okay, we're going to do a coding back problem here. One of your sections in Georgia Virtual School is decisions. And decisions are basically relating to Boolean variables and Boolean expressions, in this case a Boolean method, where we use if and if else, or even the if else case. Okay, so I'm just going to go through an example here called 2 is 1. Now before I do this, this is the best practice, I think, for coding. All aspects, coding back. Coding back is really good for practice with arrays, booleans, loops. It gives you all kind of practice, and you get immediate feedback once you try it to see if you got it right or not. So this one's a pretty simple one. Read it together. I'll go through it, and I'll also show you a couple of things you probably didn't know. So it says, given 3 ints, A, B, C, return true if it is possible to add 2 of the ints to get the third. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, because I can add 1 and 2 to get 3, that's true. 3, 1, 2, I could add 1 and 2 together to get 3. There's no combination that I can add 2 of these to get the third, so that's false. So this word right here is Boolean, which we probably know is true, false. But it's very important that it goes in this part of the method because that is the return type. It means we're going to accept 3 integers and we have to return a Boolean. Okay, so to get started, if A plus B is equal to C, it would be true. Or A plus C could equal B. That would be true. Or A plus or B plus C could be A. And if any of those things are true, then we would return true. If none of those things are true, we would return false. So first, let me just show you if A plus B equals C, return true. Okay. Now, sometimes when you have multiple conditions to check, it's useful to use an if, else if condition. So this is else if A plus C equals B, return true. So this only runs if this doesn't happen. Okay. So in other words, A plus B doesn't equal C, because if it does, we would return true, and return ends the method. It returns true here. None of this stuff is ever looked at. Okay, so let's do one more else if, which would be B plus C equals A. If that's true, we'll return true. Okay, so we have an if, else if, and then there's an else. None of those things happen, return false. Okay, so we'll see if that works first. It does. Okay, so if this is true, return true. This is true, return true. This is true, return true. If none of that is true, return false. Now, the first thing I'll show you is I can take away this else here. Now, it works here, and the reason it works is because if we get to this line of code, then none of those things were true, so we can just return false if none of these things are met. By the same logic, we can really take these else ifs away. Now, this is true in a method. When a method has to return a value, we could do that. Okay? If you were in the middle of a code that's not a method and you don't have to immediately return a value, then the if, else if, and all those things are a little bit more important when you may have to use them. Okay? So in this case, this would also work. If this is true, return true. If this is true, return true. If this is true, return true. Now, it's also common to do this. If these things are true, let's return true. But when you compile that, the compiler says you must return something. So even though we've stated when we would return true, we have to return something. So we're saying if that doesn't happen, let's return false. Okay, so now it works. And the last thing is, a lot of times if you're saying, if this is true, return true, or this is true, return true, or this is true, return true, you're really saying or, if any of those things are true. So instead of having 3 return statements, I'll leave it there. you could do ORs. So let's make sure I got parentheses in the right spot. I really don't need any of these. And this one closes that one. That's the only bad thing about CodingBat is you don't get any flags or syntax errors. But this should do it now. If any of these things are true, then we return true. Otherwise, we'll return false. And the last thing I'll say about this method is this. If you ever have the case where if something is true, you return true, and if it's not, you return false, you can also shorten this whole thing by saying return that. Okay? So in other words, this is a Boolean expression which will evaluate to either true or false. If it evaluates to true, then you would return true. If it evaluates to false, you return false. So that'll work. Okay, and the only way to get good at doing this stuff is to practice. So I suggest going to CodingBat. You're going to have assigned CodingBat problems, but it's really a great tool to get better at programming these.